This content is for informational purposes only and does not replace professional medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider for personal health concerns. Have you ever noticed how the headlines regarding the salt shaker seem to flip-flop every few months? One day, you read that sodium is a silent threat lurking in your pantry, waiting to spike your blood pressure. It feels like we are caught in a constant tug-of-war between clinical warnings and emerging data, leaving many of us wondering if we should be reaching for the sea salt or avoiding it entirely. This confusion is not just in your head, it is a genuine point of contention within the scientific community. For decades, the narrative was straightforward: salt is the enemy of heart health. Yet, as our diagnostic tools improve and our understanding of human physiology evolves, researchers are finding that the relationship between sodium intake and our bodies is far more intricate than we once assumed. We are moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach, recognizing that individual biology, activity levels, and even genetics influence how we process this essential mineral. When experts disagree, the average person is left to navigate a landscape of conflicting reports, often resulting in a sense of dietary paralysis. Are we overconsuming sodium to a dangerous degree, or has the pendulum swung too far toward fear? Is it possible that our bodies require a more delicate balance than the current public health guidelines suggest? In this video, we are going to strip away the sensationalism and look at the evidence as it currently stands. We will examine the physiological mechanisms at play, look at what the latest studies indicate about sodium's actual impact on our systems, and clarify why this salt paradox exists in the first place. To understand why there is so much conflicting information out there, we first need to pull back the curtain on how these studies are conducted and why they often point in opposite directions. But before we dissect the methodology of those studies, we have to establish a baseline of what sodium actually does when it enters your system. Without it, our internal electrical grid would effectively go dark. Your nervous system operates on a series of electrical impulses, and sodium ions are the primary messengers that allow these signals to travel from your brain to your muscles. When a nerve cell needs to fire, it relies on a delicate exchange of sodium and potassium across its membrane. Beyond the nervous system, sodium acts as the primary architect of your body's fluid distribution. This is a process known as osmosis. Your body works tirelessly to maintain a specific concentration of sodium in your bloodstream, a homeostatic tightrope walk that ensures your cells don't shrivel from dehydration or swell from water retention. This is where the conversation regarding blood pressure often begins. However, the biological response is rarely uniform. Genetics, kidney function, and the presence of other minerals like potassium all dictate how your specific body handles that fluid shift. This intricate balancing act is governed by sophisticated hormonal feedback loops. It is a highly evolved system designed for survival, developed over millennia when salt was a scarce and precious resource. Today, we live in an environment where that resource is abundant, and our ancient biological machinery is struggling to adapt to this modern surplus. Instead, we can start viewing it as a variable that we need to calibrate based on our own unique physiology. To answer that, we need to look at how we measure these effects in the real world and why the numbers on a plate don't always translate directly to the numbers in your chart. The core of this discrepancy lies in a fundamental biological divide, the difference between those who are salt-sensitive and those who are salt-resistant. For decades, researchers have observed that when two people consume the exact same amount of sodium, their blood pressure responses can look like night and day. This buildup pulls water into the vessels, increasing the volume of fluid and, consequently, putting extra pressure on the arterial walls. Conversely, salt-resistant individuals possess a more robust internal mechanism for flushing out that excess, allowing their systems to maintain homeostasis regardless of a high sodium intake. Certain gene variants influence how the kidneys handle sodium, while others dictate how our blood vessels react to hormonal signals triggered by salt consumption. It isn't simply a matter of willpower or dietary discipline, it is an inherited biological blueprint that determines your personal threshold. However, the real challenge today isn't just our biology, it's the environment we inhabit. We are currently living in a landscape dominated by hyper-processed foods, where salt is used not just for flavor, but as a primary tool for preservation and texture. Even if you are naturally salt-resistant, the sheer volume of sodium hidden in bread, condiments, and pre-packaged meals can overwhelm the body's regulatory systems. What was once an evolutionary advantage, the ability to retain salt to survive periods of scarcity, has become a liability in an era of constant, hidden abundance. This isn't just about what you add to your cooking at home, it's about the silent, invisible baseline of sodium embedded in the modern food supply. When your baseline intake is already high, it becomes much harder to distinguish between a healthy physiological response and the beginning of a chronic strain on your cardiovascular system. But knowing your own sensitivity is only half the battle. Once we recognize that our bodies are responding to this modern environment in such vastly different ways, we have to address how we track these inputs. To figure that out, we have to look past the general guidelines and examine how the tools we use to monitor our health might be leading us toward a more personalized, and perhaps more accurate, way of living. But before we can embrace that personalized path, we must first learn to interpret the language our bodies already speak. Often, we treat our physical state as a static condition, ignoring the subtle, sometimes urgent, messages being sent when our internal electrolyte balance shifts. When we consume more sodium than our kidneys can efficiently process, the body initiates a retention protocol. Think of it as a defensive mechanism. To dilute the excess salt circulating in your bloodstream, your system pulls water from your cells and holds onto it. Beyond the visible puffiness, this fluid retention increases the total volume of blood pushing against your arterial walls. Research suggests that for many individuals, this creates sustained high blood pressure, placing a silent, relentless strain on your cardiovascular system. Conversely, the pendulum can swing too far in the other direction. Sodium deficiency, or hyponatremia, is often overlooked because its early warning signs can feel remarkably similar to simple fatigue. This manifests in ways that are hard to ignore: persistent muscle cramps, a heavy, throbbing headache, or a lingering sense of mental fog. In more severe instances, you might experience nausea or muscle weakness that feels entirely out of proportion to your physical activity. Listening to these physical cues requires a shift in perspective. Instead of viewing bloating or cramping as mere nuisances, try to see them as data points, feedback from a system struggling to maintain its delicate chemical architecture. By becoming more attuned to these fluctuations, you move away from guesswork and toward an intuitive understanding of your own physiology. Yet, recognizing these signals is only half the battle. This brings us to a pivotal question: if we can learn to read these signs, what specific steps can we take to stabilize this balance? And can we actually fine-tune our intake through the food choices we make every single day? The good news is that achieving this equilibrium doesn't require a total overhaul of your pantry overnight. Instead, it's about shifting your focus toward a more intentional architecture of what lands on your plate. The DASH diet, dietary approaches to stop hypertension, remains the gold standard in this regard. Rather than viewing this as a restrictive regimen, think of it as an abundance-based strategy. When you are walking through the grocery store, the most powerful tool at your disposal is the nutritional label, but you have to look beyond the front-of-package marketing claims. Flip the item over and scan the sodium content per serving, but pay close attention to the serving size itself. Often, what appears to be a reasonable amount of salt is based on a portion size that doesn't align with how we actually eat. However, the conversation around sodium is incomplete without mentioning its physiological partner, potassium. Studies indicate that the ratio between these two minerals is arguably more significant than your total sodium intake alone. If your diet is heavy on processed foods, you are likely consuming too much sodium and far too little potassium. By incorporating potassium-rich powerhouses like avocados, leafy greens, sweet potatoes, and white beans, you are providing your body with the biological resources it needs to regulate fluid pressure more effectively. It is also worth noting that your palate is remarkably adaptable. You will start to perceive the subtle, natural flavors of whole foods that were previously masked by excessive seasoning. This isn't about achieving perfection or eliminating salt entirely. It is about reclaiming your agency over your biological environment. Yet, even with these practical strategies in place, one lingering question remains: how do we maintain this consistency when the rest of the world seems designed to push us in the opposite direction? That question brings us to the frontier of modern nutritional science, where the long-standing dogma that lower is always better is finally being put to the test. For decades, we were told to treat sodium as a universal villain, but recent large-scale observational studies are beginning to paint a far more nuanced portrait. Researchers are uncovering a J-shaped curve in the data, suggesting that both excessively high and dangerously low sodium intake may be linked to adverse health outcomes. What we are witnessing is the dawn of a personalized approach to minerals, one that acknowledges that your unique baseline, activity levels, and genetic predisposition matter just as much as the numbers on a nutrition label. Science is moving away from broad, one-size-fits-all mandates and toward the understanding that sodium metabolism is highly individual. Some people are salt-sensitive, meaning their blood pressure responds sharply to intake, while others remain remarkably stable regardless of their diet. The future of nutrition isn't about rigid deprivation, it is about self-awareness and learning to read the signals your body provides. We are entering an era where your health choices can be guided by your own biological reality rather than generalized public health slogans. To wrap things up, let's look at the core principles we've covered. The primary takeaway is that balance is superior to extremes. Focus on the quality of your food sources by prioritizing whole, unprocessed ingredients, which naturally regulate your intake without the need for obsessive tracking. Most importantly, trust that your body is a sophisticated system designed to maintain equilibrium. It just needs the right raw materials to do its job effectively. By shifting your focus toward nutrient density and mindful consumption, you are already miles ahead of the curve. This content is for informational purposes only. If you found this information helpful, consider subscribing to stay updated on our upcoming deep dives into the science of human health and longevity.